Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to Women in Preservation, our series that features women who are working to save historic places. Thank you to our series sponsor, DMX Architecture of Fayetteville, for their generous support of women in preservation. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you're not already a member, I'd like to invite you to formally join us. Our memberships are vital to the success of our organization, and they come with a host of new benefits, including t-shirts and stickers. You may learn more on our website at preservearkansas.org. Registration is now live for Destination Downtown in El Dorado, Arkansas, September 10th through the 12th, 2025. And I encourage you all to check out the information on our website to learn more and to sign up. Preserve Arkansas is excited this year to partner with our friends at Main Street Arkansas, as well as the Main Street coordinating programs in Louisiana and Mississippi. And we are offering a preservation track at Destination Downtown. You can sign up before August the 1st to get the early bird registration rate. And again, preservearkansas.org for more information on Destination Downtown. Join us again next month on August the 12th for Women in Preservation with Dr. Robin Lane, Teaching Professor of Landscape Architecture, and Rachel Tucci, Assistant Professor of Interior Architecture and Design, both at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Mary Bindas. Mary was the Building Preservation Specialist at the National Park Service's National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, or NCPTT, in the Buildings and Landscapes program. In this role, she helped tackle complex challenges in preserving our built heritage, drawing upon her experience in both building technology and practical trade skills. Mary is also the owner of Relight Restoration, which specializes in wood window restoration, merging technical knowledge with hands-on craftsmanship. Before NCPTT, her career included work as an assistant architectural conservator and crew leader, contributing to a range of preservation projects for private and nonprofit organizations. Passionate about education, Mary has taught workshops and led volunteers in various preservation initiatives. She earned her Master of Science in Historic Preservation from Eastern Michigan University. Mary is currently transitioning back to the Metro Detroit area from Louisiana, where she will continue her preservation work. She remains dedicated to helping homeowners, building owners, and stewards care for historic structures through consulting and education. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you, Rachel.
Hi.
Thank you for having me. I'm going to share my screen.
You're welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Just give it a sec. Okay, perfect. Sorry about that.
Looks good.
All right, wonderful. So, as Rachel said, my name is Mary Bindas, and I've spent the last 2.5 years living in Natchitoches, Louisiana, which is in Northwest Louisiana. And I was the historic building specialist in the Building and Landscapes Department at the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. It's also known as NCPTT, and NCPTT is a part of the National Park Service. So as my tenure came to an end at the National Park Service and NCPTT, I'm now moving, or I just recently moved back to the Metro Detroit area. So kind of to tell you a little bit more about me. So if any of you have been to Natchitoches or know Natchitoches, you know that Natchitoches has a small town feel and that they love their Christmas holiday. Christmas lights start going up in usually August. And so This is actually one of my favorite Christmas lights that they have. It is a crawdad crawfish walking a alligator. So I always thought that was pretty cool. And also something to know about me is that I live in Michigan with my partner Zach, and it used to be our three rescue dogs, but currently it is our two rescue dogs. We recently lost one; she passed away, but we still have our rescue dog Wally, and over here is our rescue dog Cooper. Um, and so I am a big dog fan. Okay. So, how did I get into preservation? I guess is the question. How did it start? So, I grew up in a small town called Hamtramck, Michigan. It's about 2.2 square miles, and it's actually in the middle of Detroit. So, any way that you leave Hamtramck, you have to drive through the city of Detroit. When I was growing up, um, I'm the youngest of three girls, and my dad was a tradesman, so he was a union electrician, and my mom was a librarian in the public school systems. So when I was growing up, one of the things that my dad always did with us is he would put us in the car and we would go drive around Detroit and the area, and we would look at old houses, and he would show us projects that he worked on as an electrician. And we would get to see these beautiful buildings in some of our historic neighborhoods in the Detroit area. But a lot of them were experiencing deterioration and demolition by neglect. And I always kind of had a passion for these buildings. I thought they were beautiful and wonderful. And I always really wanted to, see them restored and fixed up. And when I would ask my dad, like why they weren't, he would often tell me that it was resources. So sometimes money, time, people not knowing how to fix them up or having help to fix them up. So that always really stuck with me. So one of these, so this is a house, Ransom Gillis House, in a neighborhood called Brush Park in Detroit. And so this is in 2005, an example of some of the houses that we would have driven by. Um, and you can see that it's extremely deteriorated. The roof is missing. And in 2015, this house was actually featured on HGTV's Rehab Addict with Nicole Curtis. And they fixed up the house, and you can see it over here. And so it's pretty exciting when you can see them come back to life. So I didn't actually go straight into preservation. I had had those experiences, but like a lot of people at the time, I was like, I'm going to college. And so I had this all planned out. And so I went to undergrad at Central Michigan University, and I majored in public relations, so in communications. When I got out of school, I worked at a local nonprofit, Covenant House, Michigan. And at Covenant House, they help homeless and at-risk youth. They provide emergency shelter and long-term residential care, as well as life skills. And so I was the volunteer coordinator there and in the city of Detroit. So once again, I'm surrounded by the beauty of the city, but often, deteriorating buildings. And so I loved my job, but I kind of was trying to figure out what came next. And I left that job for another one at a different nonprofit and learned the grass is not always greener on the other side. After that job, I went and I got my real estate license, and I actually started as a leasing consultant at an apartment community. And then I worked my way up to property management. And I really loved getting to take care of the properties and learning about the maintenance of the buildings. And I learned a lot from that experience, but it just wasn't quite what I wanted to do. And so I was thinking about what would I love? And so I knew that I loved historic buildings and that I had this experience managing properties. So I started to look up what could I do with that? And I found Eastern Michigan University had a master's degree in historic preservation. I didn't even know that was a thing before, so I was very excited to find it. And I started the program. I started the program thinking that I would be a Main Street manager or a downtown manager because it seemed to fit with my past experience. And so I did an internship at a um, local Main Street program. And my boss there told me about this nonprofit based out of Denver, called HistoriCorps. Some of you may have heard of it. I know a past presenter has talked about it. And so what HistoriCorps does is they're based out of Denver and they have this model where they take a project supervisor who has a lot of experience with hands-on construction of historic buildings, and they take a crew leader and they send them out on federal land, so Forest Service, Park Service, Bureau of Land Management, to work on historic sites. And they have volunteers come for the week or sometimes longer, and they work on these projects, and the crew leader and supervisor teach these volunteers about cultural resource stewardship and historic preservation through fixing up these historic sites. And a lot of them are vernacular sites, so fire lookout towers, pavilions, cabins, and I absolutely fell in love with the hands-on portion of preservation. So I did 2 summers working with HistoriCorps. And so this was my very first project with HistoriCorps. It's called Forest Lodge. It's in Wisconsin. And so Forest Lodge is actually it's a pretty big complex. So it's 872 acres. Um, and it was owned by a lumber baron. And they have several different buildings on site. And there has become a partnership between the Forest Service, a local university, and the local tribe to turn this campus, because it was actually donated to, I believe it was donated to the Forest Service by the family owners. And so to turn this into an ecological education center. And so HistoriCorps came in to help fix up the buildings, and they've been doing this for years. So this was my first HistoriCorps project. It was also the first time I ever worked on windows. So I got to practice glazing or learn. I was not very good at first. Practice makes perfect, I guess, right? Um, and so we also we put new shakes on this roof, and so we re-roofed it. And so through HistoriCorps, I was really able to gain a lot of experience and in the preservation construction trades, working on different projects and learning different skills from that roofing to windows and doors to this is a pavilion that was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. Um, and you can see it's a log building. And so we replaced some of the logs. You can see over here that somebody had decided that the treatment for this log was going to be, I believe they put spray foam in it. So that log had to come out, and we replaced it with a new, more appropriate preservation repair. And over here, you can see this is my first time building a screen, a window screen, to help protect the building. And so this was a really good experience at HistoriCorps because I got to dabble in a lot of different trades and meet some really wonderful people who I was able to ask them how did they come to preservation and kind of what their careers looked like. And it really helped me determine where I wanted to go in my preservation career. And I decided that I wanted to work more with preservation, trades, construction, and to work on projects like this. And so what ended up happening was a mentor at HistoriCorps told me, if that's what you want to do, then you should look into specializing in a trade. I was going to North Carolina to do um, a conditions assessment for a final project at my university and for my university program, I'm sorry. And the building was in Elizabeth City, North Carolina. So I looked up kind of like trainings that were around, and the Window Preservation Alliance was actually doing their annual meeting there. So I thought this was a great opportunity, and I went to the Window Preservation Alliance meeting, and I met some really fabulous people. And I learned more about the business of window preservation and the ins and outs of it. And I met a really great woman named Allison Hardy, who became my mentor. And Allison Hardy owns Window Woman of New England. She's actually been featured on This Old House, and she's received many awards, and she's a fantastic teacher, and she encourages people to get into window preservation and to start their own businesses. And she changed things for me when she asked me if I wanted to come out and work on her crew for the summer. I learned so much there, and uh, this is the inside of her shop. So I actually was able to learn a ton there about the business. And from there, I went back and I was able to get another internship, this one with the National Park Service, at the Western Center for Historic Preservation at Grand Teton National Park. This is in Wyoming. And here I built upon the experience at Window Woman, and I added learning about traditional finishes. So here we used linseed oil putty. And so what that is it's just linseed oil, and it's the kind of like the pigment. And so there's no added chemicals or anything like that in it. And so it takes a little bit longer to dry. And we also use linseed oil based paint. So this was a really fascinating experience because things took a little bit longer, but it was a lot more traditional to how it would have been done. And also, um, the linseed oil paint is really good for areas that get a lot of sun because even when they start to kind of fade a little bit, you can just take linseed oil and you run it over the paint, and it kind of helps bring it back to life a little bit. And so you can kind of see we worked on doors and windows. And this is me in my PPE because when you are scraping and sanding, you should always be protecting yourself and taking care of your lungs. So, um, and this was actually, I was finishing up grad school here. Um, and so I was trying to figure out what would come next. And so after my graduate school experience, it's how was it going? So I actually got a job in the Metro Detroit area working at Building Arts and Conservation. Building Arts and Conservation is a company that specializes in the conservation of historic architectural features. And they're actually really great at decorative features, right? So you see here, you'll see a lot of murals on walls, or over here, the decorative finish on chandeliers. So this was a really great experience to kind of build out from my window preservation experience because it was something different than I had done before. I had worked on a lot of vernacular structures, and this oftentimes, while we did do some vernacular, we oftentimes did really unique projects in some higher end buildings. So this building here is an Art Deco multi-use building that had that was is so it was built in the 1930s as a bank and trust, and then like what happens to many buildings, it ended up becoming vacant and it sat there for a while. And they couldn't figure out what they were going to do with it. It was going to cost a lot to restore it. It started to get holes in the roof, so water was getting inside. What happens when water gets inside? The interior starts to experience damage. So the plaster was crumbling, which was destroying the murals. And then these Art Deco chandeliers actually had some of them had fallen and they were crushed. And so broken glass, the electrical wasn't working, the finishes were deteriorated, there was damage to the metalwork. And so finally, someone after time had the resources to come in and repair the building, and Building Arts and Conservation was brought in to do the chandeliers, some railings, and the mail chutes from the building. So what we did is we took out a lot of the original glass from these chandeliers to protect them. For the broken pieces, what we did was, because some of the glass actually has details on it and decorative features. So broken pieces were replicated. Um, and then we had to also fix the metal. So some of the metal pieces had to be bent back into shape. We had to clean them all. Um, and then we had to refinish them. So you can see we refinished and we did flash gilding on these. And so then we were able to clean up the glass, clean up the metal, and then we rewired them so they would work again. Um, and then we were able to reinstall them. This was a really cool project because I was in charge of the glass. And so there were close to 200 pieces of glass. And I managed to get them from the Metro Detroit area to Battle Creek, which I think was like a 2-hour drive in a car without any of them breaking. We did break one piece once we got there, but we were able to get it replicated. So I was pretty proud of that. And it's just a really unique, interesting project. Another interesting project that I was able to work on with Building Arts and Conservation was the Detroit Athletic Club. They were restoring their natatorium. Their natatorium is actually on, I believe it's their 4th floor, and a natatorium is actually a room that has a pool in it. So the Detroit Athletic Club was actually designed by architect Albert Kahn. And Albert Kahn, when he designed the Detroit Athletic Club natatorium, he designed the ceiling to have a herringbone pattern on it. But what we found through research was that there was never a herringbone pattern ever etched into the ceiling. And so this brought up a really interesting conversation of preservation. Because when we went to the client, my supervisor, who's the owner of Building Arts and Conservation, showed them that he found these documents that showed that there was supposed to be a herringbone pattern, but it was never put in. So it brings up a preservation question because if it was never put in, do you put it in during the restoration or do you not? And a lot of times you have to leave things up to the client, but it leads to some interesting questions. And so what we did was the original, or when we got there, it wasn't the original, but when we got there, um, these bays above the pool on the ceiling had popcorn ceiling. And so we had to scrape all the popcorn ceiling off. And then we had plasters come in and they replastered. And then you can also see the walls over here, which these were actually supposed to be cane stone and faux cane stone. And so that's what we are going to replicate. And so the owner of or the managers of the Detroit Athletic Club, after seeing the herringbone pattern and thinking about how cool it was, decided that that is what they wanted back, or wanted because it was never originally there. So we actually hand etched this herringbone pattern all the way across in all of these bays. And then we went over and we glazed the herringbone and these columns of florets. And then also we did this by hand. We etched the faux cane stone on the sides of the building. And so I guess asking you all, how do you feel about the decision to put the herringbone pattern there when it wasn't there originally? So something to think about. I love the way it turned out, though. So after being at Building Arts and Conservation, I kept thinking about windows and the experience that I had at Window Woman of New England, and I decided to start my own window restoration business. And I did this with the full support of Allison Hardy and the full support of my boss at Building Arts and Conservation. So I'm really grateful that I had those supporters. And this was actually my first project as a window restoration company. It's the Monroe Schoolhouse. It's a one-room schoolhouse in Monroe, Michigan. It was actually a subcontracted project from Building Arts and Conservation. Um, and so I was able to learn a lot on this project. The windows were actually in pretty rough shape because this building does not has been sitting with no heat. It doesn't have any AC. I mean, it never did have AC, and they have no intention of putting that in. Um, and so the windows had been degrading, and they were, getting moisture on them and deteriorating. And there had been some decisions on repairs that were a little questionable in the past. Um, so there was a lot of caulk on the windows. So this is actually the rebate or rabbit, like the glazing rebate. Uh, and so people had put caulk on it to hold the glass in place. So that was a lot of fun to try to get off. And then over here, you can see that the corner was deteriorating due to moisture, and they used a piece of metal to hold it together. And hey, I'm just grateful that the windows were still there, so that way we had an opportunity to go in and restore them. And so we were able to go in and restore the windows. And this is an example of one of the restored windows. These are actually double hung windows. And so what that means is that the top will come down. It's weighted, so there are weights in the pockets on the side. The top will come down and the bottom will come up. And this allows for water to fill, well, not water, I'm so sorry. This allows for air to kind of go in and out, helping with the cooling. And there's actually, if you saw from the picture, there's actually windows on both sides. So the breeze is able to be pulled through the building, which is pretty cool. Another project that I was able to work on was in a historic neighborhood in Detroit called The Village. And this is a neighborhood that my dad used to take us for drives in when I was a kid. And so this was a really exciting opportunity for me to actually be able to work on one of those houses. And so this over here is a before picture. They were actually made of very sturdy wood, solid oak wood. So they were beautiful windows. And this was the weather stripping that was on there, and we cleaned this up, and we actually reused it. So this is the original copper weather stripping, so you can see how pretty that looks cleaned up. And so this is the restored window. So it's really beautiful to see all of the work that's been done on the house and how it's come together. So I was really excited that I had my own business, and I was learning a lot. Um, there were, a lot of successes. There were some failures in there, a lot of learning. But I was also thinking that I still had a lot to learn, and I was kind of missing working as part of a team. And one day I saw a job posting for the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, who I'd learned about when I was in grad school. And the position was architect historical. And this person would get to help do research and training using like modern technology and innovation to help move the field of preservation forward. And when I read that, I thought, this is amazing. What a great opportunity. So I applied, and thankfully I got the position. And I do not have I'm not an architect, so I never felt comfortable with using that term. I'm not a licensed architect. So we came up with a job title of building preservation specialist. It seemed more fitting for me at the time. So NCPTT's mission, for anyone who doesn't know, is to preserve cultural resources through science and technology. We do this through trainings, through disseminating information, doing research studies. There's also a grants program where we're able to supply grant funding. And yeah, so getting to work on very unique projects and help the community to be able to answer questions and complex and find complex or find solutions to complex issues facing cultural heritage. And CPTT was actually created based on recommendations from the 1992 amendments to the 1966 Historic Preservation Act. What the amendments are, so after the 1966 Historic Preservation Act, in the 90s, they kind of, Congress got together and they were looking at whether or not the act, what was working from it and what wasn't working from it. And one of the things they decided was that we should have a preservation training center that focuses on technology and innovation so we could be a leader in the world and so we could keep up with other countries. And CPTT was then started in the mid 90s, established in the mid 90s, and it has been located on the Northwestern State University campus in Natchitoches, Louisiana ever since. So I'm going to take a minute because we're talking about what NCPTT can do for the community. And so I want to take a second because I know that sometimes our website can, well, I say our, but let me say that I am no longer, or I don't work at NCPTT. And so anything that I'm saying is not as a NCPTT or National Park Service representative. I'm just saying it as me and sharing resources so I can, help out. And so if you go to the NCPTT website, which this is the website up here, and you go to online resources. So if you click online resources, it'll take you to an area that says online resources at the top. And then it'll have a couple different boxes. One will say articles, one says preservation matters, graphic stories, and there's different sections. So I highly encourage, if you're interested, for you to go and explore those different resources because they can be very helpful to different projects that you have going on. And so a couple examples of what NCPTT has disseminated for the community is they do these preservation matters briefs. And so these are, they take like a topic that we get questions about a lot or that someone's really interested in, and they break it down into a document that you can actually print off as a PDF. And the topics can range from graffiti removal from historic features, which is this one right here. So it explains the assessment process, how to prepare the surface, chemical methods, physical methods. It'll often talk about the proper protective gear that you need. Some of the other ones have to do with flood disasters. So how do you clean your photographs if they've been caught in a flood? How would you clean books? So these are really handy guides that you can use in your communities or just for your personal use. They've also started a graphic stories series. There's 4 graphic stories on there now. This one is about preserving cemetery headstones. Another one is about wood windows. And there's one about rust converters. So these are just fun ways for the community to get information that you might want to check out. NCPTT also does research projects. And we work with interns on these projects as well. We bring interns in. And so one of these projects that we were able to work on is a reimagining of a campus dormitory hall on the Northwestern State University campus. And so I know there's been a lot of work out in the community on adaptive reuse of, buildings on campuses and things like that. But we were really focusing on the Northwestern State University campus for this case study because when my supervisor got to Northwestern State University, he was noticing that several of their mid-century modern dormitories were vacant or just their buildings in general. And then he noticed that several of them were being demolished. And this hall, Prudhomme Hall, was slated for demolition along with another building. The budget, I believe, was going to be $500,000 for demolishing both buildings. But the other building had a very strong uh, concrete foundation. And so it actually took longer to demolish and it took the budget for all of it. So we thought this is giving Prudhomme a little bit more time for us to hopefully be able to change the thoughts or at least give a vision of the opportunity to reuse it. So what we did was we brought in a team of interns and two of them were actually through the World Heritage USA professional exchange program. And so one was actually Lori Philbeck, architect out of Arkansas. And another one was we had Victoria, who is from Lithuania, and she's a materials specialist, works on preventative maintenance in Lithuania on historic structures. And then we had Sam, and Sam is actually a digital specialist. And so Sam specializes in using laser scanning to scan buildings. So the thought behind this project was we really wanted to reimagine what could happen with this building. We knew that we weren't going to do a very detailed conditions assessment and adaptive use plan or anything like that, but we wanted to see, through talking to different partners, so people at NCPTT, people at Northwestern State University, um, would this be something that they were interested in, and what uses could it have for them? And so the building is a mid-century modern building, and the team did a fantastic job on this reimagining. They spent time going around and interviewing the head of the art department, the head of the science department, individuals at NCPTT about their lab and space needs. And they really took time to think about the materials of the building, um, and the position of the building, sustainability and green infrastructure. We actually took a tour and visited an architect out of Lafayette that specializes in this. And some of this is very important in Louisiana or in the South with the heat. And this building has a lot of cement around it, asphalt around it, and so not a lot of coverage. So what could we do to kind of give this building a new life, or at least get people to think about it in a different way? And so the crew that was in charge of this project, so Lori, Sam, and Victoria, they put together this proposal and did a presentation to members of the NSU staff and NCPTT. And you can see this is actually the shape of the building. And so this is a parking lot. There's a baseball field over here and some greenery. And this is the main entrance. So this is over here is also parking. And so it has other buildings that are very close to it. So that also kind of hindered a little bit of what the use could be. And the campus is also kind of broken up a little bit. So thinking those things through on how we would get people and walkability, things like that. And so down here, you can see that they used modern technology, in this case, AI, to visualize what could the hall look like. And so these are some of the renderings that they got, and they used several different tools, which is what we really wanted to see from this project, is what kind of modern technology and modern tools could be used in order to help tell the story of what this building could be to persuade people, right? So it was a lot of different facets coming in. And so here is what one of the existing hallways in Roy Hall looks like. That's a different building on campus. And this is the walls demolished because they've restored Roy Hall. And then this is a possible reimagining. So picturing, because Prudhomme was very similar to Roy Hall, and then picturing if this is what you did at Roy Hall, you could do the same thing, just with more in Prudhoe. And one of the ideas was opening up space so that way more light could come in, having the art department be able to have art displayed in the hallways, using top floors for residential or short-term stays, because actually in Natchitoches, it's really hard to find housing a lot of times, especially short-term housing. So that was a big need that we heard a lot about. And then from a sustainability standpoint, one of the ideas that they came up with was a green roof. And so you can see there could be classrooms held up here. Um, you could actually watch the baseball game from up here. And so there were a lot of really fantastic ideas that came out of this. And when they presented this idea to people at the university, they were really excited about it. And so we're hoping that, this maybe changes some people's minds about future use of the buildings on the campus and that there will be next steps with it. Another project that I was able to work on at NCPTT was this is Fort Pulaski. And so Fort Pulaski is a fort that is between Savannah, Georgia, and Tybee Island, Georgia. And so it was actually built in 1861. And in 1862, the Union Army actually successfully tested rifle cannons, which put these holes in the side of the building. And so they were able, the Union Army, when they did that, they blasted a hole in the side of the building, and they were able to take over the fort. And so the reason that you can see this is me and this is my coworker. The reason we are scrunched down like that is because we are using a laser scanner, and we use several different types to collect data of the building. We did the exterior and interior of the building. You may say, why would you do that? So one of the reasons that we did this was it, one, helps preserve where the building is at right now. And so you can then compare that data to either past scans or future scans. So you can see how the building materials are holding up. Are they deteriorating? Is the building moving? And so that's helpful. Where the idea was to get the scan to see where the building's at, as well as to be able to create models in systems online, to be able to make decisions for planning purposes for the fort. So that could be anything from, using the fort to kind of pinpoint, okay, these are the different mortar repairs on the building, and this is what was used to repair the mortar, and seeing over time how that stands up. Another idea is that the fort is actually being really affected by moisture. I mean, it's right off the water, right? So you have a lot of salt in the air, you have a lot of moisture, rising damp, things like that that are affecting the building. There's a lot of fog out there. We had a lot of really foggy mornings that made it hard to scan. And then also, if you think about it, because it's right on the bay, there's a lot of large ships that go by. And as more and more ships go by, that's affecting the landscape, and in turn, often is affecting the building. And so being able to use this to create models, so saying we have this data, if over the next 50 years, it's estimated that the water is supposed to rise, however much. You can actually put this model into a system and then calculate and see where that will affect the building. So this hasn't been done yet. The project was started in January, so we've just collected the data. So the next step of modeling has not been completed yet, but it's pretty cool to see the building and see what kind of deterioration is on the building. This is actually from the cannons. And you can see too, I don't know if you can see right here, but this is actually a crack going up the masonry wall. And so a model like this will also help you to be able to monitor what these cracks are doing. So this is a great resource for planning purposes and for modeling for future planning. So this has been a really cool project to work on. And we actually used multiple different types of scanners on this. So we used the regular laser scanner, and we actually were able to send it up into the air. So that's how we were able to get the top of the fort. We also went up on, this is the terraplane. So we went up on the terraplane and also scanned. And then we used is called a to-go scanner. So you hold it in your hand in front of you and you start to walk, and it's able to collect the data on either side of you. Um, and so, um, and we used a 360 camera. So you put it down on a flat surface and it spins around and it collects the information. And all of these scanners were able to help fill in the information for the fort. So pretty cool project. Another project that I was able to work on is first floor flood elevation modeling. And so this project actually started before I even started at NCPTT. NCPTT had been working with partners out of Florida, and they scanned our partners scanned St. Augustine. And so this project is actually on so where Fort Pulaski is on a kind of like a micro scale, like a building, a micro scale, right? So you're trying to get into the details there. First floor flood elevation is going to be more on a neighborhood or a city scale, right? So that's going to be more macro. So you're taking the laser scanners or the scanner, and you are going down neighborhood streets, and also they're using drones to collect data from the sky. And so they're collecting images or the data and you can kind of see this is from the street view that they collected. And so they did St. Augustine, downtown St. Augustine. This is Catano, Puerto Rico. The capital region in Washington, D.C. is being done. So they're collecting large scale data sets. And so first floor flood elevation, what are they using this for? And so they're using it to be able to determine that if an area, like a historic area floods or an area floods, how high up will the flooding go on certain buildings, right? So a good example of this is after Hurricane Maria, the Puerto Rico SHPO contacted FEMA and asked for assistance in creating digital documents to document their historic structures, because their current historic structure forms are paper, and they were worried that if flooding happened, that the forms could be destroyed. So moving forward, they wanted to kind of go to a digital model. And then also they wanted this done for a specific neighborhood. So I believe downtown San Juan was done the year before I got to NCPTT. And when I got there, we did this historic area of Catano. And so what we did was we went and we, with several partners. So at the time it was Tulane University, but our partners now at LSU. And the Polytechnic of Puerto Rico, the Polytechnic University of San Juan in Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rico SHPO, so State Historic Preservation Office, I'm sorry, and the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training. We got together, and in order to meet the needs of what the State Historic Preservation Office was asking, we created a 3-week training program, and we taught students and professionals how to go in and use technology to document the buildings through photogrammetry and using digital forms. We also taught them how to laser scan the buildings such as this over here. And so that was a 3-week program. And then they were taught how to process the data in order to come up with maps like this, first floor flood elevation maps. And then we had 2 World Heritage USA interns um, uh, who stayed on for extra time for an extra, I believe it was 5 weeks. And they actually process the information for the State Historic Preservation Office. And that's where we get this from. They processed the visual um, laser scanning data and they created these maps. They also created a how-to guide so the State Historic Preservation Office could continue this work and they could give someone the how-to guide so that way they could follow the instructions and, create these maps using GIS. And so the way that this is done is so you take the scan of the neighborhood, so all the pictures of the buildings, and then you go in and you manually pinpoint the first floor flood elevation, so a front door or something on the first floor of every single building. So you can imagine that takes some time. And then you put that as a level in or layer in GIS. And then you take data from NOAA, insurance maps, things like that on flooding levels. So if there was a 50-year flood, if there was a 100-year flood, where do they see that flood level coming up? And then you're able to put that over the layer in GIS, and it will identify which buildings are most at risk based on first floor flood elevation. You're also able to see if that building has a second floor. So if there's flooding and their first floor is affected, how can they get or do they have a safe place to go for a second floor? This data is really important for planning purposes, and it also empowers communities to know which houses are most at risk, and it gives local governments the power to be proactive and to start looking at those solutions as well. So this is a pretty cool project. And one of the thoughts is that hopefully these large-scale data sets will be able to put into machine learning. So then teaching the machine how to process this. So eventually, you won't have to manually find the first floor. The machine would do that for you. So, needless to say, I've been able to work on some pretty amazing projects with the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, and in my preservation trades construction experience in life. At the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, I also was able to do teaching. So workshops, stonemasonry workshops, teaching university groups that came through. So I was pretty lucky in that way. And so how is it going now that I'm transitioning? So I would love to keep in touch with all of you. So feel free to email me if you have questions about any of my past work or window restoration, future work. So I am now full-time in the Metro Detroit area, and I am jumping back into window restoration and consulting. I would absolutely love to talk more about partnerships and answer any questions that you may have about preservation or the field or working together. So please feel free to keep in touch. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully getting to meet you all one day. And thank you all so much.
Aha, there I am. Thank you, Mary. That was a wonderful program.
Thank
Uh,
you. Oh,
if anyone has questions, you have time to type them in the chat or the Q&A, and Mary will be glad to address you. And I've got some questions in the meantime. You've already shared several resources with us. Thank you. If there's any additional things you didn't already cover, are there any other resources you think that people should know about?
Absolutely. So I think that, exploring the NCPTT website further is a great resource, as well as some of the other, um, national park site websites. And they have some really great resources out there. And then campaign for historic trades. They have a fabulous website with a lot of learning resources. And I know that Natalie Henshaw has done a previous presentation. Um, and so she actually taught me how to be a crew leader at HistoriCorps. So that's pretty exciting. Um,
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah.
great.
And then, so what else? Oh, Window Preservation Alliance. You can actually go on there and find local window specialists in your area. The Preservation Trades Network, they often have resources. Um, and I'm trying to think. If I can think of any other ones, I will try to provide them, but there are a lot of um, like Facebook groups and things like that for these organizations um, that will help you. And I know like research wise, so the or NCPTT has some research on window restoration and things like that, and I'll try to send that over to you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see, you've got, okay, question. Would really like to see training in Arkansas for window restoration, updating electrical, etc. Me too, Paula. We we've sponsored a few window restoration workshops over the years, and so has the Quapaw Quarter Association. And Preserve Arkansas offers a scholarship for people to go and take class. If we can't afford to bring the workshop here, it sometimes works out better for us to send people to the Belvedere School. Seems to be where most people go to see Bob Yap and learn window restoration and other techniques from his school in Hannibal, Missouri. It's not that far away. Um, it's
Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
And also along those lines, if you haven't, I would check out the Craftsman blog. Scott Sidler is a fabulous window restorationist, and he actually has classes and things like that, like
Oh,
online
great.
courses.
Okay. Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Okay, let's see. So when someone tells you or calls you up and they're not sold on the fact that window restoration is the thing, do you have some things that you can tell people about why it's important to restore their windows rather than replace them?
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I often talk about is that, um, a lot of times people will see their windows and they say, oh, they're too far gone. Um, Wood windows are almost never too far gone, right? And also something that's pretty important with window restoration, or something that I think is pretty cool about it, is that, I know sometimes people have limited resources. Well, with window restoration, one of the great things is that we can often tailor it to kind of your needs, and based on like, okay, maybe your one window only needs to be reglazed, but your other one needs to be fully restored. We can do that for you where if you're getting somebody to replace your windows, they're ripping all of them out, and you're
Mhm.
you're not going to have that historic value anymore. I often talk about, that historic integrity of your home, right? One of the reasons that we buy historic homes is because we love the historic features of them. If you rip that out, especially windows, you're not going to have that any longer. And depending on the window that you replace it with, they're not going to last as long as your historic window will if your historic window has been restored or repaired. So often with vinyl windows, you might get 10 years out of it, and then you're going to have to replace it. Where with your historic window, it might need some TLC, but it's probably going to last a lot longer. As well as something that can happen is if you rip out your historic window and you're ripping out kind of the frame and stuff like that to put in um, a vinyl one, you're mixing materials that were not meant to kind of be together, right? So your wood can breathe, right? Your wood can move. Your vinyl window isn't going to do that. So sometimes you end up with additional issues um, with other parts of your house ending up with cracks or water issues. And so these are things that you just kind of want to be aware of. And so I like to just kind of say, I'll come out and take a look and we can walk through your window together. Because I think when people kind of see it, uh, sometimes it helps change their mind.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Thank you. And have you always, I'm just so impressed with your initiative and your story about how your career evolved that you're like, oh, I want to do this. I can do, what can I do with these skills and these interests? I'll go do this. But
Thank you.
well, you're welcome. Have you always felt like you were handy? Like, were you comfortable just saying, okay, I'm going to be able to work on a wood window, no problem. I can use
No,
tools.
no, actually, not really. And it's interesting because, as I kind of said at the beginning, I grew up around tradespeople, so union tradesmen. My dad was an electrician. My godfather was a plumber. I grew up around carpenters. And so they would all get together and, help each other work on their houses, things like that. So I did grow up around tools. Like my dad taught us how to use tools and things like that. Um, but when I was growing up, I just always had this idea that um, I I was going to go to college, and so I never really spent as much time as I probably should have or could have, and I didn't feel like I was very good at those things. I maybe just brushed it off. Um, and so it was very interesting when I got to grad school and realized how much I loved it and just how special it was because I was like, wait, this was right in front of me the whole time, you know? It was right there, but I just wasn't ready to accept it. And so in some ways, I kind of had to relearn how to use certain tools and I had to learn certain processes where I'm like, I remember saying, I really wish I would have paid more attention to my dad, right? Like I could be so much further along. Um, but one of the things that I found that I really loved was I often have this tendency to be a perfectionist, which and that can stress you out. And it is great in window preservation because I do pay attention to details and I want things to look really, really beautiful. But in preservation and in construction trades, one of the things you learn is that if you make a mistake, depending on the mistake, but in a lot of ways, if you make a mistake, it's fixable, right? And it's an art form, and you don't have to be so hard on yourself. And there's always more than one way to do things usually. So that was something that really drew me to it, and I embraced and kind of helped build confidence with me as well, right? So I feel like everybody should learn how to use tools and learn how to, because it really does help build your confidence.
Thank you. It was an excellent answer. My last question, unless anybody else has anything, is what can we do to encourage more people to get into this kind of work, to get into historic trades?
Yes, absolutely. So I think, there are a lot of organizations that are having these conversations and, trying to brainstorm. I actually spoke at a workshop for Tulane University Historic Preservation. They put it on, I want to say last October, and it was about how to get more people in the trades in the Gulf Coast, right? And so we had some of these conversations, and there were a lot of ideas, and it one thing that kept coming up was, you know, we think about putting more information out there and but who's going to do it, right? Because people are so busy. So one thing that I thought about was these graphic stories that NCPTT does. Could we do graphic stories where they feature tradesmen, like master craftsmen, and then we could put those in schools where students are getting this earlier, also encouraging schools to have those courses or uh, what was it in the Metro Detroit area. I actually worked with the Girl Scouts and put on a couple trades courses, so introduction to carpentry, window restoration, getting students earlier. And so I think too, having these conversations and talking about the fact that there are jobs in this, and there is, you can support yourself doing it, but also helping people connect with how they can get involved, right? So the campaign for historic trades, them talking about the apprenticeships and how you can contact, local craftspeople that you can apprentice with. And I think that as well is having conversations with students about, if this is something you think you might be interested in, contact a shop. Maybe you can go take a tour. Maybe they would be willing to, kind of explain it a little more. Having students, get, and not just students, right? Because actually in historic preservation, we see a lot of people doing like the trades as a second career, right? So a
Mhm,
lot of people
mhm,
have a whole career first, and then they're like, I'm tired of sitting behind a desk, so I want to do something new. And I think those resource pages and knowing where you can go and learn the trade is really important. So I think just staying connected um, with those organizations like Window Preservation Alliance, Preservation Trades Network, Campaign for Trades, um, and you know, us also reaching out to master craftsmen and saying, how do you want people to find you? I think in our area, right? Like, do you need help? How do you want people to find you? Um, because I think that's important as well, is, where are they looking for apprentices, and how do they want to be connected with people?
mhm. That's all good advice and good ideas. Thank you so much. You have some kind comments thanking you, and Melissa Dysart offering that she's spent her career in trades and created tinkerization stations
I love that.
for
Yes,
all ages.
absolutely.
That's
That's
great.
fabulous.
Okay, well, thank you again, Mary. Thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
Bye.